while we've made these strategic investments. We're going to walk in and say we've reduced our cost in the organization by $1 million or more without sacrificing the investments in the business that he just talked about, while volume has also not been what we expected in the fourth quarter. I will tell that story to our shareholder every day of the week. But what we could control and what we do influence, we delivered on. Volume we don't always control. We can influence, but we don't always control. So I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish this year. I'm very proud. And as Bruce said, some of the dynamics we think are happening is nobody's spending money in the industry. So they're pushing fall volume into the spring, which then to me says we may have a very heavy spring. And so that goes to my question is, how are we preparing for spring 2020? And here's a couple of things I want to share with you on reflecting on a couple of reflections I've had. First, when you go back to safety and credibility, APM, and at least in my knowledge, had never sat across the table from the GE chairman. So everybody knows we're a GE company. And most of you get emails from Larry Culp every now and then. He sent one out yesterday about lean. To my knowledge, APM's never been at the table with the GE chairman. Culp, Emil, Welch, any of those folks. October, we were sitting at the table with the chairman. And what was the topic? It was safety. We were brought to the table as partners with Gas Power's EHS leader to talk about our vision for safety in the next 3 years. And why are we sitting at the table? Because we built some credibility. We built credibility because we are a resilient organization that had a lot of punches thrown at us from a safety perspective, and we made some changes, and we've seen some fruits of that. So that was a historic moment for this business. Now Larry Culp knows who APM is. He knows that we have a passion for safety that may not be matched by any other organization in the GE business. And he understands that when we see problems, we go out and we address them, we fix them. We have a high say-do ratio, if you will. That's important. That was a big day for our business. The other reflection I had is what we talked about as a leadership team about a month ago. We had a tremendous spring, went straight into summer of investment, bringing multiple people here. And then we hit Labor Day. And did the organization take a collective breath? I saw signs that we took a collective breath. And some of the rigors, some of the expectations we had on daily things like X's, either a stagnancy or a slip. And the question was, were we sustainable? The question was, in my mind, did we think it was sustainable now? We didn't have to have as much focus on it. We started to think about other things. We saw one weekend in particular, a couple of weeks, where we saw that. And we quickly, when we saw it, quickly corrected, went back in. As we're preparing for 2020, and we're preparing for what, by all accounts, we hear is a heavy spring. How are we preparing now so we don't take that collective breath in January? I have more about taking a breath at the end of the question and answer. But how do we prepare now so we don't take that collective breath? And for me, if you haven't picked up on the messaging, run the play and finish strong, run the play and finish strong, we got the right playbook. Run the play. Don't take a breath, run the play. Critical X's, hot tools like CBS, like STA, like STOP. We got all the right plays in the playbook. run the play, finish strong. As we look forward into 2020, just a couple of things for you to think about as well. Our chief team spent a lot of time talking about where are we at with our culture. And particularly, we had a focus walking into this year on accountability. We spent a lot of time talking about we've improved in some areas on accountability. There's some areas where we still need to improve. So we're going to continue to focus on accountability in 2020. I want three things in particular that we talked about. Clarifying expectations, being very clear about what's expected of individuals. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to do a bad job today. Sometimes the challenges and the conflicts come because people don't understand what's expected of them. So we have a team that's dedicated to revising our performance development process. And as part of that revision, it's clarifying expectations. By when we clarify expectations, we have more likelihood that people will actually be able to accomplish and be accountable for what we would ask them to do. Lead by standard and not by exception. We gotta be a business that operates on standards. And we too often this year have focused on what are the exceptions to that standard. Well, there's a reason why we didn't do it this way, or there's a reason why we didn't do it that way. We got standards for a reason. And we need to all be running in the same line with those standards. So focus on leading by standard and not by exception. And then we had this on our blueprint for this year, answer with consequences. And we talked a lot about what does consequences mean. And if I polled this room, say how many of you, when you hear consequences, think that's a bad word? Well, like discipline. Is discipline a bad word? Yeah, most of us respond, that's a bad word, I don't like that word. Okay? I love the word discipline. I love it. Okay? But not because it's pulling out the belt and getting after my 7-year-old son. Consequences is just as much about celebrating when people do accountability well. And can we do a better job of highlighting when people do a great job of accountability? When they do stand up and they say, here's what I see and here's the actions I'm taking. That's accountability. And a lot of people do that well. And instead of thinking about consequences as we need to show when people do things wrong, we need to have discipline when people do things wrong. Let's pull people towards accountability. Let's show them what the right thing looks like. And let's reward the right behaviors. And if you have a conversation with somebody that says, why didn't I get rewarded? I liked what you did for that person, why not me? Then you have a conversation about accountability. But we can pull people towards accountability with leading by example. Highlighting and celebrating an example. We're still going to have a focus on the safety keystone. That will never end. We're still going to look at the fleet strategy with the organization and lines of business. And we're still going to look at where our markets are and what the dynamics are, and are there changes we need to continue to make within the organization. We work in a very volatile industry. Things are constantly changing. I can't protect us from that. This leadership team can't protect you from that. What we can do is we can prepare you for that and develop you so that you are constantly thinking about what changes do we need to make in the organization to be better. And that's where I love the idea of lean coming back into the organization. Because lean is about value. Lean is about valuing what you do as an individual and how do we continue to change and improve what you do so every minute of your day is spent on something valuable. That's what lean is. It's a respect for the individual's time and energy, and you're doing something valuable. And that's the mentality we need to continue to work. So embrace change from that standpoint. Where can we be of most value, whether it's you individually or whether it's the business as a whole in meeting the demands of the market? So with that, I lost my bet by 2 minutes. I'm going to be quiet. Now, some lucky winner will get $20 at the end of the session. But I'm going to be quiet. And I'm gonna open it up for questions. Would it help if I take questions from the floor first? Longer?
I just try not to find this
On hold?
on hold.
Yeah, normally you could say, if you put us on hold, don't. If they put us on hold, they don't know that we're talking to them because they're not talking to us. So we gotta identify the line and mute it.
So we are going through the process of muting anyone who has not muted themselves. If you are on the phone and you have not muted yourself, I'll just ask briefly. If you're over the phone, please hit *6. And if you're over the Skype, please mute yourself through the Skype application. Thank you. All right, so for questions, the first question says, why is there beeping? Hopefully we're correcting that. We're working on it. No, please, if you do have questions, now's the time to put them in. You can put them in the live chat area. I'd be happy to read them out on your behalf. You're also welcome to put them in through the email that I sent out directly prior to the call.
While we're waiting, what questions do you have in the room? They may not be able to hear us, so we have to repeat it, but what questions do you have in the room? To at least get a list started. Yes, Kevin?
You said something about volume is something we can't control, but we can influence. Do we have any control over the volume? I mean, 10%, 20% on the type of various work that we do? Or is it just 90% GE says we have these jobs?
Yes. I think that's an important question that people outside of here need to hear the answer to as well. And that's the pause on that. But I may come to you and say, Kevin, repeat your question.
Welcome to the audio.
Other questions? I can't see if you're raising your hand.
You are now joining the meeting.
Other questions?
For those on the phone line, are you able to hear me now? You can respond inside of the chat. Don't feel alone. We'll be right back.
They said yes.
Okay, great. Sorry for that brief pause. Okay, lots of yeses. That's good. All right, so we were taking questions in the room while we were working on the phone line for those of you who just rejoined us. Jake, go ahead and continue, and then we'll move to the questions from the chat.
So we did have an excellent question from the floor in here. So, Kevin, I can't pass the mic to you.
Yeah, so you said volume was something we can't control, but we can influence. So I was curious on what percentage of control do we have on volume, if any?
Okay, so let me repeat your question so the people on the phone can hear as well. So I made the comment that volume is something we don't control, but we can influence. And Kevin's question is, how much of that volume really is within our control? What ways do we influence it versus control? I'll give a little bit more explanation as to why I said that. So, as Kevin, as you pointed out, 95+% of our work today is working with GE, our shareholder. So, and we rely on the GE team, the sales team, the commercial team, to go win work. That's what I mean, we don't control all that volume. We're not actively engaged in the going out and selling and commercializing a vast majority of our work. But there are a couple of things we do. One, from an influence standpoint, how we execute influences decision-making by customers. So if we deliver a safe job with quality, on time for the customer, it's competitive, that influences the customer's buying decision. And it also gives ammunition for a GE sales and commercial team to then go and sell services and craft services as part of their overall offering to other customers. So we do have a significant influence on that. We also have a significant influence on that because we are the relationships in a lot of places. I was at a job site last week. It was clear to me our superintendent had the strongest relationship with the customer on the other side. And how our team was executing was a large reason why that customer wanted us at that facility. So relationships are a big part of that. And even though we may not be the ones contracting with that customer, where we have significant relationships, especially with first level decision makers who can influence the buying decisions of the customer. Now there is an element of it that we do control. There's work we do externally to GE. There's work that we primarily do that may still be under GE, but we are primarily the only group that does it. The Canadian boiler model is a good example of that. We have a little bit more control over that directly, but it's a tiny percentage of our portfolio. But I want to leave you with two things we're looking at to grow that percentage. One is we're looking at the growth organization. Charles is here with us. We have tried to do this through the lines of business for a number of years. We're looking at the growth organization with Charles, and do we need to more centrally functionalize this to get better traction on the areas where we do directly control the commercial strategy for the organization. The other thing is we've got a number of opportunities. We actually have made traction in some areas. We're doing some work in Mexico right now. We have grown in some third-party work on like inventory parts specialists. There are areas in which we have grown volume, whether it's internal to GE or external. Our problem historically has been prioritizing that, particularly with an operations team that's also focused on execution. And it's realistic to expect an execution organization to also be a growth organization. So we're looking at some of those things and whether or not a centralized growth organization under Charles would help with that strategy. So did I answer your question? Is there anything, Charles, you or Dan would like to add to that?
I think you said it well. It's a partnership. I'm working with Dan's team to work through some of these strategies so that we can go and actually increase the volume associated with third-party work that GE uses and then goes out to the, where they're sending work outside of the GE organization. So there'll be, I think, a lot more coming in the first part of 2021.
All right, I'm going to take a few of the questions coming over online. And just a brief reminder for all of us, Jake, myself, anyone else that may be answering questions, let's keep the mic up so everyone over the phone line can hear us loud and clear. The next question I have over the online chat. What do we do when a customer wants APM craft on their job, but not necessarily the GE portion?
I can start with that. We use discretion and wisdom is what we do. That's not uncommon in some places. The number one thing GE brings to the table on a job site is APM craft organization and the APM value. Not uncommon. We also are a GE business. We have to remember that. And we have to use wisdom in delicately balancing those two relationships where you got a customer that likes APM, doesn't see value in maybe other GE service offerings. And you got a GE organization that's trying to bring more value to the customer. My answer to that question is transparency. Transparency with the customer that says, we're a GE organization, and we appreciate that you see we add value, but we also need to make sure that we're not hurting a bigger GE focus. And transparency with the GE organization that says we're bringing value and the customer doesn't see value in what you're bringing to the table. And if you're not going to address that, then we're going to address that. I think we have taken some steps here this year in being a little bit more transparent with some of our GE partners and when that occurs, while still giving GE partners an opportunity to work through those relationship issues. I will also say this in closing, and I'll turn it to Dan. Look, a lot of times where our craft is the value add. There are times where it helps us to be a GE business because sometimes we didn't do a very good job with the customer as well. But the customer has GE equipment and they know we're the ones that can work on GE equipment. So we have to keep that relationship and that partnership going. It does nobody any favors if we start to go to war with GE over customers. Not gonna happen. Okay, but if we're transparent and we hold our GE partners a little bit more accountable to, if you don't bring the value to the table, then you need to look at the value we bring to the table, and that may be your service offering while you figure out what your value is. That level of transparency, we're starting to have more transparent discussions with our GE partners about that. I didn't hit it all.
All right, there was a communication shared a few weeks ago regarding the decision to freeze award nominations for the remainder of 2019. Can you explain why the business has taken that stance?
As Bruce stated, there are 2 or 3 areas where we have significantly invested in the business. There are 2 areas where we're probably going to go over budget of what we budgeted this year on an aggressive operating plan that we're going to go over with. One is awards and overall compensation, and the other is training and development. So the decision we made to freeze awards was because we saw a number of awards coming in the fall that were pushing us over the budget for that area. And in years past where we had the luxury of anticipating more margin than we projected, we had the luxury of going over budget. So you have the combination of we're already going over budget, and we're not seeing the volume that gives us the flexibility to continue with that grace. All we did was said, oh, pause. 1 month. Everything in the hopper is getting evaluated and doesn't get wiped away. So awards that were in the hopper through that date were evaluated, not getting wiped away. But we're going to pause for the remainder of the year because of the lightness of the fall volume and because we were already over budget on that investment. And I want that to be something that we repeat for you. The 2 areas where we went over budget this year already and we were comfortable with was employee compensation and training and development opportunities. And if that's 2 areas we go over budget, I'm fine with it. But being good stewards and seeing how the fall was playing out, we needed to pause. Okay, and 1/1 is a new day, a new start, and we'll have a budget for that, and we'll go back to looking at awards on 1/1. There's a 1-month pause because of going over budget and because of the lightness of the fall. We weren't going to have the luxury of continuing to go over budget.
Are we planning to invest in electrical work?
I can start it off. A lot of the conversations that we're engaging in this week is strategy. have a lot of dynamic people in the operations group, a lot of great ideas, a lot of entrepreneurial skills. Trust me when I say we've got a lot of people trying to take us to new plateaus, open up new doors, new horizons for us. Really what we need to do and what we're going to start doing kind of 1/1/2020 with the general managers of the business is really look at, prioritize, where do we think we can grow? What's it gonna cost us to get into these businesses? Use Charles and Charles's group for what's the strategy to win, and then really put kind of effort in that. The electrical business, it's a great opportunity. What it affords us is when we look at balance of plant opportunities, you really can't be a big on-site type contractor without looking at the electrical components. So whether electrical business drags BOP opportunities in, or BOP drags electrical in, the one thing I will tell you, everything's on the table. The people that have these ideas will get you engaged. But really what we need to do, instead of trying to do 16 things at the same time, let's prioritize them, let's lock and load them, and then we put them down the barrel one at a time after we figured out what it's gonna take us to do it. So the answer is, yeah, it's available.
Just a brief reminder, if you're not on mute, please do place your phone on mute. You can do that using *6 or mute yourself through the Skype app. This next question I think is maybe a spin-off of the last one. I'll let you collectively decide if you feel that it's already being answered. Have we budgeted capital appropriately for the investment of growth opportunities and the tooling upgrades that would be required?
We go through it as two process every year where we poll the GMs on what is needed. We consolidate that information, try to put a return on investment to it, and then we try and sell that to the GE group that we report into. So that's been done. We've been given a budget this year, and I think what we have teed up has been approved. So to answer your question, I mean, everything that was teed up so far has been approved by GE.
Are there any significant process changes that we should expect next year?
I mentioned one already. We're going to change the way we do performance development. It's trying to build clarity and improve our accountability muscle. I know, and if Julie was here, I'd probably hand the mic to Julie and let her answer, but we're keeping Julie at a distance because she's ill at the moment. We don't want that fever spreading to anybody else in the organization. There's always going to be process changes. In a way, that's lean. Lean is always looking for opportunities to get better. There's always going to be process changes. The airtime is always going through some evolutions because we are getting tremendous feedback from people on what can be done better. I don't know how many projects Lizette has in the hopper right now from a lean perspective, but there are quite a few projects that Lizette is helping individual teams on and leaning out processes. So there's a phrase that Tim introduced me to that I really like. If you don't like change, you're going to hate extinction. There's always going to be change. And the question is, do we keep up with the change? Do we prioritize on what changes make the most impact? And how well do we build a muscle where we embrace change as just part of getting better? And if you had a mentality, good today, better tomorrow. If you build that mentality, then you're not afraid of change. change. Because you always see there's a next step in getting better.
How are we doing with winning renewables opportunities?
Well, right now, we're talking with a group in Canada about their hydro work, and that may bring a significant amount of volume to our business. I would say hydro one. Hydro is where we're really looking at. And it has a strength in Canada where we've been doing some things with that Canadian group, the GD Renewables group in Canada, on hydro. And we're talking with them about changing that relationship where we take on even more of that work. So from that standpoint, I think it has been a struggle and it's been a frustration at times, but we're making some traction. We have had some inquisitive discussions with solar and battery technology groups, but that goes back to some of that's the electrical stuff that Dan talked about on prioritizing. Do we really bring value there? Some of that scope is not within our current framework today. There's a lot of civil scope associated with that, which is not in our framework today. We've looked at wind for a while, but wind, in a lot of ways, does not fit the model that APM has as an organization. So for us to go after wind, we would have to look seriously at model changes within a group, and I'm not sure I don't think we've said that makes sense for us to do. We don't bring much value to that compared to the investment it would take. So I'd say mixed, but we do have a focus on hydro, and we're making some traction, particularly in Canada. And I would expect that relationship's going to change in 2020 and likely change to the benefit of both us and GE Canada Renewables, where we're going to be taking on more ownership of work there and be the primary go-to. Anything you would add?
All right, I've got, well, just kidding, I have more than that. Okay, I've got a few more questions in the online queue, taken quite a few there. I want to pause briefly and just ask if there's anyone in the room that would like to ask a question before I proceed with the online questions. Going once, going twice. Okay. What does the future hold from our leadership's perspective for our rigging business?
Well, I can tell you the rigging business, the service director, Joe King, is here with us today. It rolls up into Nick Rockman's business and specialty services. I think right now we're in the process of hiring a new manager to take on that business, an ops manager. I think honestly, I think the future's bright for that business. I think it's always been kind of in the rough. I think Nick is seeing where it might possibly be a diamond in the rough. I think that business has the ability to stand on its own, stand alone, make the kind of profit margins that will satisfy Bruce as far as the company requirements. I think there's some opportunities to figure out how to incorporate the riggers and the rigging business into some of the other lines of business that we have. So right now, my thoughts around rigging are very positive. I am looking for that business to not only be sustainable, but to continue to grow and kind of broaden and expand their horizons. So as far as I'm concerned, operationally, we've got plans and rigging's part of it.
So the rigging business financially is doing very well this year compared to prior years. Volume up a little bit, but margin up significantly, which is a great thing. I went up to Boston 5-6 weeks ago and spent some time with the team. And what is obvious is there's a desire to want to grow. But from from what we saw, that there's gonna have to be some changes probably, in some of the ways they do business. Being more efficient is one thing. So we talked to them about lean and talked to them about streamlining some processes, because the way some of their processes currently work, in order to grow exponentially, you would have to add exponential costs, which we want to grow, but we want to be able to do it with existing resources to get the appropriate return on investment. So I agree with Dan. The outlook is positive. We just need to look at making some of the processes a little more efficient.
All right, I've got 2 more questions online. I'm going to take those 2, we'll answer them, and then we'll close out to honor time. So one of the last 2, do we believe that our shareholder is supporting us with the necessary training programs and resources to be successful?
Yes. When we have conversations with our shareholder, number one, let's go down into the last board meeting. We had Ashok Ganesan, who's our GE shareholder representative on the board. So we're one of the 2 businesses that he currently oversees that is self-sufficient and doing well, let's say. Stable, thank you. Stable. That credibility, that performance gives us credibility, which then gives us the flexibility to make the investments we need. We're not getting questioned on those investments. We may have to justify something, but through our justifications, we get approvals for that. The other thing I'll just share with you is that we're going to have a new board structure in 2020, in which we're going to have a couple of other GE participants at the table as advisors for a more strategic discussion on APM. And the board has reserved they've always had authority to make certain decisions. They've elevated those authorities so that the decisions they have to make on a granular level ain't as much, or not as much. And we have more authority to make those decisions. So yes, our shareholder gives us flexibility, and we have credibility that if, number one, if we roll something up, and we've got good justification for it, they're generally going to buy off on it. As Bruce said, what we rolled up in our S2 was approved. What we asked for got approved. And number 2, in years where we have abundance, we have the flexibility to go over budgets to invest as long as we meet the commitments. So yes, I would say shareholder does give us the freedom and the flexibility to make those decisions and make those investments as we see fit.
All right, our last question, Jake, and then you can close out. What is the most impactful thing from your perspective that we have done this year to improve and maintain our safety?
One thing's hard. I mean, we came out of the summer meeting with saying it was a multifaceted approach. I'm not sure that there's any. You're asking for me for one thing, and I may get there, but it really wasn't just one thing. It was, it was a multifaceted approach. We reorganized the way safety and operations work together. We got more mature in the critical X mentality and behaviors and disciplines on a job site that would drive safety. We brought awareness to it. So we have to fix this, and the whole Keystone mentality of everything starts with safety and then goes from there. I think it's a multifaceted approach. One thing, and this is going to lead into my closeout, so one thing. Meaningful conversations. When I was sitting with Cole, and I was giving the safety moment to start the discussion. I talked about when we had Entergy here, one of our largest customers, in APM's Leadership Development Center for an entire day workout focused on safety. How we could help Entergy, how we could perform better on Entergy job sites. And it was all about the conversation. Meaningful conversations. What is CVS? CVS is a conversation tool. How can you have a meaningful conversation with somebody about safety? Other hot tools, stop. What is stop? Stop is somebody who cares enough about you to intervene and have a meaningful conversation with you that says, I see something that you could do better, or I see something that may be putting you at risk, and I care enough about you, and I'm going to intervene. What do all those things have in common? Meaningful conversations. Taking the time to say, I care. I want your success, you want my success. And let's have a real meaningful conversation about what success looks like, particularly how we go home at the end of the day safe, better than when we showed up. So all these tools we've talked about, they're all about driving conversation. So if there's one thing you asked me to point to, it's meaningful conversations. It's not just brushing over it, not making a safety moment just something we do, but it's a meaningful conversation about what's the most important thing we do every day. And I've seen that, we've seen that organically happening in the organization this fall. We have job sites that are posting posters with pictures of families. Why do I work safe? And they're conversations. There may be conversations about what that person's doing in that picture, but it's a constant reminder of what's most important. What's most important is going home to the people that are counting on us to go home. And those meaningful conversations make a difference. So if it's one thing, it's meaningful conversations. And to close this out, I wanted to share with you, we're entering the holiday period, and there'll be opportunities for us to get away, hopefully spend some time with our families. I got this text this morning from my boss, from Missy. So I'll give you a little background here real quick. I've been on the road. I was on the road quite a bit in October and November, and I'm going to be on the road the first 2 weeks in December after Thanksgiving. So here's the text. I feel like we're too tired to talk at night. That is true. I do fall asleep in the chair too often. Can we make a lunch date to talk about kids' Christmas ideas? I need to include you this year. So normally I just write a check. She takes care of the gifts, and I'm as surprised as the kids are when they're opening up the presents. But she needs me this year. And more than anything else, she just needs to have a meaningful conversation. She needs to know that I've got her back, that I'm invested in this too. It's just having a meaningful conversation. And I need to create some space to have a meaningful conversation with my wife so that the holiday time and our family is taken care of. So I'll leave you with that. As you go back, we got to prioritize and finish the year strong. But I want you to focus on what commitments do you need to make at the end of the year so that you spend time with the people that you love, that are counting on you, and that you come back the first week in January energized. And we're not taking that breath, but we're running full speed ahead with the actions that we have in place and with the strategy we put in place building on 2019. So thank you all for joining. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year if I don't get to talk to you. And let's keep the momentum going. At the end of the day, we've had a strong year overall. more people are going home safe. Make sure you go home safe, and make sure you spend time with your families this holiday season. All right, let's close it up.